The topic of human rights of minor boys to bodily integrity and autonomy is slowly but consistently advancing one funeral at a time and one country at a time. Devastating news for those still practicing 3rd millennium BC medicine, but fantastic news for the vast majority of the planet populated largely by normal people. In other news, the maintaining of the awareness concerning the looming deadly danger of Marxism is done one institution at a time and one country at a time. The more countries join the club of utterly rejecting Marxism and actively working to keep it out, the better. Meanwhile, more and more women start feeling the negative effects of feminism on their own skin, as even the most beta soy boys start saying that enough is really enough. And speaking of enough is enough, there's also, let's call it a scuffle, I guess, inside the comic books industry that we'll cover a little bit because it comes with fantastic news for sanity. So these are our stories on the Good News video. Hello everyone and welcome to the 4th installment of the Good News video. Alrighty, so a lot of nice things have happened lately in addition to the usual insanity, which we'll talk about in the next video, particularly in the countercultural front. It's been quite a while since I've seen non-leftists consistently hitting back in kind, and all I can say is that it was about bloody time. And of course, a lot more is needed. So, the first piece of news is from the Memories of Communism topic, coming via Estonian World, Tallinn to get a museum of communist crimes. The Estonian Institute of Historical Memory has launched the preparation of an international research center and museum of crimes of communism in Tallinn, Estonia. The center and the museum are to be established with the support of the government of Estonia and leading remembrance institutions in Germany, Poland, Latvia and Lithuania. According to Sergei Metlev, the public relations manager at the Estonian Institute of Historical Memory, the effort is aimed to bring together a diverse international coalition of regional and international experts, researchers and educations to secure the historical legacy of societies that faced communist regimes, to conduct fact-based objective academic research and provide education in this field. The Museum of the Crimes of Communism is to be established at the Patarei prison complex in Tallinn that was used by both the Soviets and the Nazis, often for inhumane purposes, throughout the 20th century. According to the organizers, the research center will help understand the machinery, ideology and crimes of communist regimes and to analyze the historical impact of their policies and actions. Close quote. Good stuff. You see, the countries of the Intermarium have been trying for over a decade now to get some broader international recognition of the atrocities committed by the adherents to the communist ideology and the mental sickness that communism indeed is. But the success has been rather mixed, not least because up until 2014 the European Union itself was led by a Maoist, the European Commission had in its membership several former members of the Supreme Soviet, and the hammer and sickle was an accepted symbol even in the hallways of the European Parliament, which in and of itself also has communist parties represented in it. But while that particular front is relevant in and of itself, the awareness and recognition must start at home. So such institutions should exist throughout the Intermarium and in every country that was affected by the communist Bolshevik disease. Also, from a pragmatic point of view, if you want, such institutions are economically useful as well. This is self-evidently true if we look at comparable institutions such as the Terrorhaza in Budapest, Hungary, the Victims of Communism Memorial in Sigetomarmati, Romania, or the prison at Lonskoho in Lviv, Ukraine, all three of them covered on this channel, and all three being not just important centers of learning, but also an economic factor in their respective local communities. These places do attract tourists, and what better way is there than to make money while teaching people about the evils of communism? So yeah, good on the Estonians for making this happen. The Baltic region absolutely needed such an institution, since it was one of the few, if not the only, former communist area that indeed lacked an institution like this. Alright, let's move along to a subtopic of the culture with which I'm not particularly familiar with, namely comic books. Now, I've had people on Twitter asking me to do a video about this and the Comicsgate scandal, but I really can't because my familiarity with the topic is at best minimal. Nevertheless, when reading articles like this one, I cannot help myself from enjoying it. Marvel Comics' fresh start looks like a return to old cliches, titles The Guardian. Another year, another relaunch at Marvel Comics. On Tuesday, it was announced that it is revamping its output with a project called Fresh Start. Its May launch will be, by my count, Marvel's 7th or 8th fresh start since 2012, coming just a month after the company last rebooted its characters in September 2017's Marvel Legacy line, and cementing the company's reputation as the serial monogamist of the comic book industry. Over the past couple of years, Marvel has made some genuinely significant changes to its core characters. It replaced billionaire inventor Tony Stark in the Iron Man costume with a 15-year-old black girl, Riri Williams, deemed Thor unworthy to wield the hammer Mjolnir, and passed the mantle to love interest Jane Foster, and in the most divisive storyline ever, revealed that Captain America was a secret sleeper agent for Nazi analog Hydra. But Fresh Start is a back-to-basics approach, restoring the original version of Marvel's triumvirate, as well as bringing back a dead one, the deceased Bruce Banner, who will reclaim his position as Hulk from current Jolly Green incumbent Amadeus Cho. In the video, Marvel editor-in-chief C.B. Cebulski proclaimed that he's never seen more excitement and more enthusiasm for where Marvel Comics is going this year, adding that there hasn't been such an overarching line-wide change of talent since the Marvel Now revamp of so long ago, 2012. A number of problems at Marvel led to this revamp. The big one is that most of the characters involved have appeared in Marvel's movies or TV series, or are about to, including Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones and Daredevil. Yes, perhaps it makes sense for Marvel Comics to mirror what's going on in the multiplexes if it wants to migrate movie buffs to the printed territories. But new readers who are introduced to the characters by the movies should have their eyes open to the possibilities of what can be done in comics, which eclipse even the biggest Hollywood special effects budget. They should be offered a wider universe, not just a mirror one. Making the source material reflect the adaptations feels like putting the cart before the horse. There was also the negative reaction to last year's Marvel Legacy reboot, which introduced the infamous Captain America as Nazi storyline. Many readers were appalled by the movie, which fell around the time Marvel's vice president of sales complained that the studio's attempt to diversifying the universe by adding more female, black, Asian and faggot characters was not going down well with the core readership. Brian Michael Bendis, one of the company's star writers and the creator of Iron Man's female replacement, Iron Heart, and the Miles Morales African Latino version of the Spider-Man, has since left for rivals DC Comics. And two gay characters with their own titles, Iceman and America Chavez, had their books cancelled at the end of 2017, not long after an industry breakfast that Marvel hosted for comic shop owners at New York Comic Con, where some retailers lambasted the diverse editions, with one repeatedly insisting that kids don't come into his store and buy a comic that featured Iceman kissing dudes. If Marvel is indeed pandering to a more conservative readership, The article goes on, that has grumbled incessantly about the proliferation of black, faggot and female characters in recent years, then given the phenomenon box office success of Black Panther this last week, there's something decidedly rotten in the state of fresh start. Maybe they'll get back to some of white male middle America that's drifted away, but comics are and should be progressive and transgressive, rather than winning back that demographic. Marvel's execs should perhaps be looking at the news footage of those astonishing survivals of the Parkland school shooting in Florida and listening to what those kids are saying about change and reform. As far as I am concerned, Marvel should be your... as far as I'm concerned, Marvel, that should be your market. First of all, it's funny that this author, David Barnett, is purporting to tell Marvel what their market should be when, first of all, he doesn't work for them, and second of all, he doesn't read them, and most importantly, his own comics do indeed pander to leftists and other weirdos, and yet he doesn't have his first $1 million from comic books. So maybe, just maybe, Marvel has a point and this author is an idiot. Just a thought. But on a more serious note, it is a good thing to see other industries just moving on and letting the leftists speak, duly ignore their bullshit and carry on with their business as usual. First it was the gamers, then the gamblers, now apparently some of the comic books as well. Now, I do realize that this is a simplistic analysis because there's a whole intricate political network inside this tiny industry, some of which will likely end up reshuffled a little bit by the Comicsgate scandal, but in broad terms, this does seem to go in a decent enough direction, or at the very least in a far better direction than it was 2 years ago. Because those interested in this subtopic need to also bear in mind that the comic book industry is minuscule and regional. Comicron.com, which is the best resource for research on this topic, does a good job at showing just how minuscule this industry is. As you can see on the graph, the overall orders amount to a meager $30 to $35 million a month. And overall, throughout North America, it comes to a grand total of just a bit over $1 billion a year in sales. Now, that may seem impressive until you realize that there are single movies who sold a lot more than that. One single movie. Not to mention the gaming industry that makes that kind of revenue in about 3 or 4 days. The gaming industry generating about $110 billion annually at this point. In both of those, I did not include the low-tier players, such as the author of this Guardian article in the case of comics, or indie small studios in the case of games. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the way the industry itself is built means that pissing off your core demographic has immediate economic consequences, and you don't even have to piss off the whole or most of the audience. If 15% of the core audience is pissed off and stops buying your books, that's enough to drive the whole thing in the red and soon after, well, out of business. And the reason I even bothered to mention all of this is because those who opine on this topic tend to forget to put things into perspective. So you have on one hand the progressives like this schmuck who claim Marvel could or should move its market to pander to a few dozen students in Florida who may or may not even read comic books to begin with, a piece of information that neither me nor this author even has. And then on the other hand, you have the die-hard fans who are usually non-leftists who rant about the topic as if it's the most important thing in the culture, when in reality, it really isn't. If the entirety of the comic books industry were to disappear tomorrow, the vast majority of the planet would never notice. So it's important to keep things into perspective because for the non-left, for our people essentially, it is a winning perspective. If the industry is small and so reliant on a core demographic being pleased, then progressive infiltration is bound to fail every single time, especially with larger firms who can't afford to be revolutionary since their profit margins are already quite low. Basically, if you want to fight the left in this particular cultural arena, then be aware of the economics, because economics always wins, and in this case, the economics of the matter absolutely favor a non-leftist perspective, and you should use indeed economic-based arguments, because when you agitate for a purge of the leftists. Just saying. Alright, moving on. Let's piss off some Americans a bit more and talk about male genital mutilation, which thanks to millions of people like me is increasingly becoming haram in Europe, and what a good day will it be when it finally disappears altogether as a practice, as it absolutely should. So, as I'm sure many of you have already read, Iceland is considering a bill that would ban male genital mutilation. More specifically, the Icelandic parliament is considering to amend the already existent Genital Mutilation Act to replace the word girls in the bill with the word children, thus finally recognizing that boys are human as well and thus deserve to be protected from being unnecessarily harmed. Naturally, this has gotten the Muslims and the Jews' panties in a twist, leading to hilarious statements like, "This is an anti-immigration bill," or "Jews are no longer welcomed in Iceland." Well, first of all, even if it had been an anti-immigration bill, which it isn't, what would be the problem with that? I mean, Iceland is still a sovereign nation after all. Secondly, if your religious identity hangs on the prepuce of innocent infants, then maybe the problem is your religion rather than human rights legislation. But the thing is, the religious argument is entirely bullcrap, not just because the secular government shouldn't give a shit about the religious sensibilities when it comes to the bodily integrity of infants, but also because the argument from the religious leaders themselves are inconsistent, well, with their own religion. Here's the thing. In Islam, circumcision is a recommendation, not a mandatory practice, and it usually takes place as a rite of passage around the teenage years. That's horrible, but it's a lot better than infant mutilation. Because at the very least, the individual gets some sort of a choice in the matter. And the Icelandic bill basically says the choice is free to be made at the exact same moment when the law recognizes the individual's right to consent to sexual activity, which is 15 in the case of Iceland. So the Muslim argument is, quite frankly, hollow. In Turkey, a deeply Muslim country and where circumcision is common, it actually does take place around the age of 14 or 15 anyway, without government regulation. So the whining from the few Muslims that do exist in Iceland is just that, whining. The Jewish argument is a bit more compelling because, in theory, circumcision is a covenant to be made in the 8th day and, again, in theory, is a mandatory condition to being accepted into Judaism. However, as it happened a gazillion times in the past with both Judaism and Christianity, this can be, and indeed is being, subjected to reform as we speak. As I mentioned multiple times in the past, since I've been talking about this issue for close to a decade now, there are growing Jewish anti-circumcision groups all over Europe and in Israel itself. I emailed some of those groups, hopefully I'll get to interview some of them when I get down there. But in the meantime, it is worth noting that circumcision among the Jews in Denmark is essentially non-existent at this point, and this is without Denmark outlawing the practice, although Denmark will likely be amongst the first to do so. But since this is the situation, does that make the Danish Jews less Jews? Of course not. Also, are the now tens of thousands of Jewish boys and young men born to Jewish parents in Israel and raised in Israel, are they less Jewish because their parents decided not to mutilate them? Of course not. And to make it even better, this argument is spreading, much to the appallment of rabbis and imams. So, from the Times of London, Jewish parents shun circumcision. Jews are increasingly choosing not to circumcise their sons and to hold a naming ceremony instead, a rabbi claims. Anti-circumcision campaigners say there is an increasing movement within Judaism to forego the removal of a baby boy's foreskin in the Brit or Bris Milah ritual. David Smith from the Genital Autonomy Group said, quote, "We've worked to promote a ceremony called Brit Shalom, which has a ceremonial element, but it doesn't have the circumcision," close quote. Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain of Maidenhead Synagogue said, quote, "It does happen and it is a new phenomenon, a result of parents wanting to have an initiation ceremony into the Jewish faith but without circumcision." He said an increase in interfaith marriage was a factor, close quote. Now, that's a red herring with the interfaith marriage talking point, since there is almost no interfaith marriage in Israel, yet it is far more prevalent than among the Jews in Britain. Sorry, Rabbi, but this is an issue on which your kind are bound to lose. And what makes this even a better piece of news is because I predicted most of this back in June 2015 when I wrote the article "Genital Mutilation Rates Are Dropping and That's Great," in which I basically outlined a consistent pattern of individuals dropping such practices once they become better informed about the science behind it, or lack thereof. And it works regardless of religion or political views. Now, this doesn't mean that this will go down easily, mind you, but the progress is remarkable even when compared to 3 years ago when I wrote that paper, not to mention when compared to 20 years ago when ignorance about the topic was far more abundant than it is today. Most nice things happen silently and, yes, one funeral at a time. The obvious advocates for genital mutilation are increasingly very old. And that's great. Alright, let's move along. Coming from Breitbart. Roku won't drop NRA TV. We do not curate or censor based on viewpoint. Popular streaming device manufacturer Roku has refused to censor NRA TV following mob pressure and protests from Moms Demand Action. NRA TV promotes dangerous conspiracy theories, racially charged rhetoric, and violent demonization of the NRA's political opponents, claims the pressure group Moms Demand Action on Twitter. Tell Apple, Google, Roku, and Amazon to #dump NRA TV, they continue. In response, Roku refused to censor NRA TV's content, noting that they hadn't broken any of Roku's rules. We share deep sadness about the recent tragedy that occurred in Florida. Our streaming platform allows our customers to choose from thousands of entertainment, news, and special interest channels representing a wide range of topics and viewpoints, Roku declared. Customers choose and control which channels they download or watch, and parents can set a PIN to prevent channels from being downloaded. While the vast majority of all streaming on our platform is mainstream entertainment, voices on all sides of an issue or cause are free to operate a channel. We do not curate or censor based on viewpoint. We are not promoting or being paid to distribute NRA TV. We do not have and have not ever had a commercial relationship with the NRA, they continued. Their channel is free to consumers with no ads. We welcome Moms Demand Action and other important groups to use our platform to share their messages too. Roku then added, while open to many voices, we have policies that prohibit the publication of content that is unlawful, incites illegal activities, or violates third-party rights, among other things. If we determine a channel violates these policies, it will be removed. To our knowledge, NRA TV is not currently in violation of these content policies. This week, FedEx also refused to sever its relationship with the NRA, expressing that it supports the constitutional right of citizens to own firearms. Following their refusal to bend to mob pressure, the pop rock band Blink-182 and many others called for a boycott of the company. I'm sorry, but anyone taking his or her moral cues from Blink-182 seriously needs a helicopter ride. I mean, seriously, Blink-182 is the band that gave us songs like this.
I wanna fuck a dog in the ass. He wants to fuck a dog in the ass. I wanna fuck a dog. That's right, kids. I tried to fuck your mom in the ass. Tried to fuck your dad in the ass. Could only find the dog and his ass.
So yeah, good on Roku and FedEx to tell these degenerates to kindly and very politely and with all due respect and compassion to go fuck themselves. I mean, seriously, anyone agreeing to bow to the pressure from out-of-nowhere groups like Moms Demand Action, whose financing is dubious to say the least and supported by zoophilic groups like Blink-182, anyone agreeing to bow to pressure from such lowlives needs to also be boycotted by normal people. I'm sorry, but you do lose your right to virtue signal and grandstand on moral issues once you proclaim your ardent desire to fuck a dog in the ass. It's not an unreasonable standard, isn't it? And the good news isn't over. This whole exercise of the left against the NRA isn't going down quite well as they had hoped because, well, suddenly the non-left has found its spine. And it's lovely to watch. Suddenly the consumers are hitting back in sufficient numbers to matter. This would also be a good moment for any of our people who are in these companies to start working on subversion strategies. I'm very serious when I say this. Now, this is the moment when they are vulnerable. So now it's a perfect time to infiltrate, agitate, subvert, and engage in wider active measures. This is a dispute that can be won provided that the non-left is willing to fight in the actual terms of this war rather than the terms many right-wing intellectuals from places like National Review imagine the war is. Now, I got nothing against National Review, mind you, it's actually quite a fine publication most of the time, but writing a pompous essay on the pages of the National Review doesn't exactly count as doing something and doesn't win cultural wars. Agitprop and subversion wins issues. So, a bit about the numbers. Coming from PolyZ, NRA boycotters get spanked in public opinion polls. Public approval ratings plunged for companies that severed their ties with the National Rifle Association following the Parkland, Florida massacre of 17 students and teachers, according to a poll released Wednesday by Morning Consult. The hashtag boycott NRA went viral as activists applied pressure to companies connected with the NRA to distance themselves from gun rights group and their discounts and incentives for members. The Morning Consult results suggest decisions to sever all types reaped negative results. Morning Consult's Ryan Rainey noted that the survey conducted among 2,201 US adults between February 23 and 25 found increases in negative views of businesses that severed their ties with the NRA after consumers learned of them. Although MetLife Incorporated retains the 45% favorable rating it held prior to discontinuing its NRA members' discounts, disapproval of the company doubled from 12 to 24% after the poll's respondents were informed of the decision. Unfavorability ratings for the three major rental car brands associated with Enterprise Holdings Incorporated all more than doubled among surveyed adults after they learned about the company's ending discounts for NRA members, Rainey noted. Enterprise Rent-A-Car saw its favorability rating plummet from 61 to 50% as its disapproval rating rose from 12 to 25%. Although neither Alamo nor National Car Rental saw their approval ratings change significantly, the disapproval rating rose from 10 to 24% and 11 to 25% respectively. Many companies find themselves increasingly struggling with how best to deal with pressure from activists across the political ideological spectrum to take a stand on hot-button issues dominating national discourse. Business leaders are increasingly under pressure, largely from younger generations of socially conscious and digital media-savvy consumers, as well as from employees to take a stand on everything from immigration to gay rights to climate change, the Wall Street Journal's Vanessa Forams and Rachel Feinzeig wrote on Wednesday. A 2017 survey from public relations company Weber Schandvik found that almost 50% of millennials believe CEOs from large corporations have the responsibility to lead the way on important issues, while just 28% of Gen X and baby boomers believe the same. Pro-gun control websites like Think Progress are tracking the companies still doing business with the NRA amid mounting pressure, plus lists of the companies that caved into their pressure. But some companies, including FedEx, Apple, and Amazon, have defied pressure and declined to sever their ties with the NRA. Dick's Sporting Goods succumbed to another kind of pressure by announcing Wednesday that it would no longer sell quote-unquote assault rifles and would require all purchasers to be 21 or older. But the NRA also remains firm in its resolve to defend the Second Amendment, saying in a statement Sunday that the loss of a discount will neither scare nor distract one single NRA member from our mission to stand and defend the individual freedoms that have always made America the greatest nation in the world. In time, these brands will be replaced by others who recognize that patriotism and determined commitment to constitutional freedoms are characteristics of a marketplace that they very much want to serve, the NRA said, close quote. Good. So, by the numbers, quoted by the left, even the majority of millennials believe like we do, namely that businesses should basically ignore activists and that virtue signaling is bad business practice. Translation. Militant leftism is a minuscule position, and the only reason it's being given the time of the day is because the normal majority doesn't fight back. And it absolutely should. The increase in the disapproval ratings is of course good news, but it also needs to be doubled down by a cancellation of services and a sustained moving of business elsewhere. The NRA itself could help with some of the coordination, quite frankly. Some of this will happen by itself anyway. I mean, who rents more cars? The NRA types or the soy boys and SJWs who moan about the NRA? Serious question. But this needs to be sustained over a longer period of time. Conservatives need to figure it out that besides elections, we vote with our wallets several dozens of times a day at the very least. So, go out and vote for those who stand for the Second Amendment and explicitly against those who don't. We didn't start this war, but we should work towards ending it. And the only way to end it is to crush the left in as many areas as possible via polarization. As long as normal people are afraid of polarization, the deeply polarizing left will always win. So that has to change. Alright, moving on, coming from Bitcoin news. Las Vegas strippers accept Bitcoin via QR tattoos. There has been a lot of talk recently about the missing representation of women in the male-dominated cryptocurrency ecosystem. While Las Vegas strippers are not the representation some hoped for, they are an example of how Bitcoin can help working women control their financial affairs and avoid potential problems with prudish banks. A Las Vegas news show has featured a segment on an adult entertainment venue in the city which enables its dancers to get payments from clients directly via Bitcoin transfers. The use of the cryptocurrency was primarily showcased as a privacy-enhancing measure, such as preventing your wife from seeing the payments on the credit card bills, as well as an attraction for affluent Bitcoin investors. The Las Vegas strip club is called the Legends Room, and we reported about its opening back in May 2017. The local news team interviewed the founder, Nick Blumgren, as well as a number of the adult dancers at the place. They even explained how visitors can use the in-house Bitcoin ATM to buy cryptocurrency at the club. Furthermore, the dancers can choose to wear temporary QR tattoos as wallet addresses that can be scanned on a smartphone. Besides the privacy concerns of the patrons, the use of the cryptocurrency allows the dancers to avoid explaining to banks where they got large amounts of cash. I'm not going to name names, but there are certain banks that will shut down your account and actually deny you from having an account because we work in the adult entertainment industry, says Summer Chase. Asked how often customers want to pay with Bitcoin, Brina Sparks answered, "Oh, quite often. Like the people that come here, they are like really into crypto. I feel like this is very smart. They're really into that." She says she likes checking her balance a lot. It's fun though. Once you invest, it becomes an everyday thing. The 26-year-old dancer became interested in cryptocurrency when she was 19. Now she and her friends think cryptocurrency may be the future for adult entertainment workers. It's peer-to-peer, it's anonymous, and it's instant, Sparks said. "When I first heard about the concept, I thought, wow, this is really something different, you know," said DJ Saint Clair, who gets part of her salary in cryptocurrency. Alright, so this is good news purely from the privacy standpoint. The idea that banks would shut down your account because you get money from the sex industry sounds to me like something out of the old Soviet Union. So workarounds to such a draconian system are always welcomed. But beyond that, These are the things that will drive the further acceptance of cryptocurrencies in general. And as I said in the only video I ever made about the topic, cryptocurrencies will start to matter when you can actually spend them in real life situations. That's when they'll become relevant. Anyway, we'll talk more about cryptocurrencies in the upcoming periodic insanity episodes. So let's move on. Let's move on and talk about feminism a bit. First, there is this article from the Swedish far-left magazine ETC. The feminist initiative draws criticism for its parliamentary list, Identity Ahead of Competence. Very long article, no way I'm reading all of this since we're already kind of short on time, but it starts off quite like this, quote, "This weekend, the Feminist Initiative Party will not decide only on party leaders and election platform. At the extraordinary conference, a parliamentary list shall also be drawn up. Several names are brand new. At the same time, relevant spokespersons for the party end up so far away that they will for sure not get into the Riksdag, which is the Swedish parliament, if the 4% polling of the party stays. Identity politics has been pulled so far as to damage the electoral potential of the movement, several critics claim. It's election time again, and the idea is that the weekend's conference in Malmö will give the feminist initiative both a clear platform to run on and a candidate list to carry this young party, formed in 2005, across the threshold and into the Riksdag. Many of the people interviewed today by ETC for this article think the party is on a positive trend after they managed to win a seat in the European Parliament after almost a decade of work and also managing to pass the magic number of 3.1%. In 2014, the Feminist Initiative got 5.5% in the European elections. Each party needs a platform that reflects the will of the members, but also the selectors' needs, and soon the Feminist Initiative will take care of the latter by selecting its parliamentary list. So what does that tell us? Looking at the first 14 names on the list, which are the eligible ones if the Feminist Initiative gets 4%, the nomination committee appears to have appreciated experience from municipal policy, but not experience from contributing to what is most commonly called policy development. A concrete example is Associated Economical and Political Spokesperson Martin Jurdo, who has been working hard to assure Feminist Initiative's own shadow budget. He has been responsible for producing this budget. He has strategically built up trust in our economic policies and made sure we put figures on the feminist revolution, says the nomination committee, while placing him the 21st on the list. ETC reached out to Martin Jurdo for a comment, but he declined to talk to us. The nomination committee is in charge of a purge, says a person who himself is on the list, but with minimum chance of getting into the Riksdag. Identity prior to proven competence and contribution for the party in terms of important expert knowledge, identity seems to go before all of that, says another person who has held several positions in the party leadership, close quote, and then it goes on and on to quote many more critics from inside the party, and surprise, surprise, many of them don't want to comment with their name attached to it, because on the far left, dissent is haram. But seriously, this is good news, a fantastic news. Because in the current climate, the best way to make sure this degenerate organization stays out from the parliament is to put its looniest people on the list. Heck, even the Social Democrats are sick and tired of the feminist bullshit, so more stunts like this, please. The more you pull these stunts, the better. Because make no mistake, the goal here is to make sure the Feminist Initiative gets less than 4% and stays where it belongs, outside of the parliament and as far away as possible from any genuine power. And it's a good thing they're willing to lend a helping hand in crafting the narrative. Of course, Gudrun Schyman, the de facto party leader and the former communist, well, she's still a communist, just no longer a member of the Communist Party, but she knows this is a bad situation. She just hopes her long experience as a far leftist politician will be enough to carry the party over the threshold. Our people's job will be to make sure that doesn't happen. For instance, the more environmentally concerned of the FI supporters could be persuaded to vote for the Greens, since FI did not select anyone with an environmental background. No, I'm serious with this. We should try agitating among them. This political party needs to be sabotaged every step of the way, and we need to get cynical with this. A Riksdag with the Feminist Initiative in it would be intolerable. Also, other active measures are in order to lower the Greens electorate, because the Green Party also hovers around 3.8% to 4%. The ideal outcome would be to have FI and the Greens finishing at around 3.8%, thus effectively having a Riksdag without those two cancerous parties in it. Meanwhile, on the right, someone needs to subvert the moderates even further, because this is a good chance to have a supermajority on the right. And the first policy should be the raising of the threshold to 5%. This whole everybody deserves a voice thing is good in terms of the press and the wider public. Censorship is indeed cancer, but in the parliament? Why should any loon with 200,000 votes be in the parliament? This is just madness. And I do realize this would also mean the Christian Democrats would be out, but that's fine, because the KD has been doing all what the Christian Democrats have been doing in Sweden lately has been essentially delaying leftism. Anyway, more on that when the elections will be closer. And finally, something to recommend to you all, some reading material. Now, I obviously won't read it because it's long, but it's totally worth it, purely for the schadenfreude in it. So it's on the Literary Hub, and it's an essay by far leftist feminist, but I repeat myself, complaining that even the cucked beta males are starting to say, you know what, I don't have to support any of this, buzz off. It's a long article, and in which a militant cunt essentially complains that she and many of her fellow militant cunt friends have found themselves abandoned by their men. Their husbands, their boyfriend, and their male relatives are slowly but consistently and decisively saying, you know what, enough is enough. And it's even nicer to read from the perspective of the feminist, because when I told you that this will happen, it was much easier to ignore. After all, what do I know? I'm not married to a feminist, and I've been practicing Mike Pence rules since before I knew Mike Pence existed. But when it's a lefty establishment, Twitter-verified feminist who tells it, that's a lot harder to ignore. Sorry, I mean lefty establishment, Twitter-verified salty feminist, since she didn't take kindly my congratulations for her article. But in all seriousness, I meant it when I congratulated her. That article alone converts more people to anti-feminism than I can in 1 month of sustained work. You should definitely read it, because it's a trend that will not stop anytime soon. This is not a question of will happen. No, it's already happening. The hashtag MeToo nonsense appears to be enough even for soy boys and submissive males. Feminist women are learning, as we speak, that there are indeed limits, and that even the most posh soy boy will still eventually tell you to go fuck yourself and your misandry, even if it takes him years to find his spine and words to do so. Alright, just a few quotes. I just can't resist. Quote, my husband worries about our daughter, she told me recently, that I'm only teaching her she's a victim. One day, while she was picking their children up from daycare, he burned a handful of her possessions, her nasty women's shirt, her Hillary Clinton pins. My husband filed for divorce, another confided a few days later. He said he left me and shared in some of my frustrations, but could no longer tolerate, he said, the level at which I felt them. Hours later, another one wrote to tell me of a save the date no longer in need of saving. My fiancé called off the engagement, she wrote. He loves me, he's sure, and I believe him, but he's overwhelmed with everything and doesn't know how to confront me, and doesn't love who I have become, close quote. This is, put simply, great! And this trend should be encouraged and amplified every step of the way. I wasn't joking back in February when I said that polarization needs to be embraced and amplified. Feminist women must be made intolerable in polite society. It should be a hallmark of shame for anyone, man or woman, that is dating a feminist, let alone being married to one. No, you should be ashamed of that. Kick these bitches to the curb, and the cuckolds who support them. They wanted polarization, so I say, let's give them polarization, but the proper way, the way it renders them really alone. And please, without the cats. I mean, come on, I love the cats. Cats are cute little fluffy animals who've done nothing wrong. Why should they be punished so harshly as to live with a feminist? That's just animal abuse. But no, seriously, go read that article. It's very long and oftentimes incomprehensible, but it is nevertheless a goldmine of whining that should indeed raise your morale. Also, it's funny how this individual is Twitter verified. With a bit over 1,000 followers, she's basically at my level, which goes to show just how rotten the so-called big mainstream culture really is if such a lowlife gets a column in the New York Times and gets to be called an essayist. I probably wrote in high school superior essays, but back in my day that was called doing your homework. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. But anyway, I'll discuss education in a bit more in a separate video soon enough. So yeah, this concludes the 4th installment of the Good News video, and now I shall head towards recording the 19th episode of Periodic Insanity. So with that, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your consistent and generous support. Please do subscribe to my social media. Do drop a shekel if you derive any value from the work being done here, and I'll see you all soon on Freedom Alternative.